Bonjour ladies and gentlemen, it is Traeger Terri here. I am back with another tasty Traeger treat for you all. Today we are going to be cooking up chicken fajitas. Now the tortillas, you can buy them from supermarkets. It's like a couple of quid for like 4 or 6 of them. We're literally just going to make them because they are so simple. Even in lockdown when it's hard to get a hold of flour, it's totally worth having a go at this recipe because it's so easy to do and it'll save you a fortune in the long run. So to start with my flour tortillas, all we need is a big bowl, some water, oil. Cheap oil is arguably better than olive oil, plain flour and some salt, and a spoon. You will need a rolling pin later on, but we'll get there when we get there. So I've got these quite handy little measuring cups, which both have the European measurements on them and the American ones. So to start with, we're just going to throw our flour in here. So all we need is 2 cups of flour, which I think is about 500 grams if you are doing it in metric. So pour it in there. 1. Got our flour in there. Next, jug of water. All we need is 1/3 of a cup, which I think is about 85 millilitres. So scoop that in there and pour that. That's the majority of our liquid. Now for the next bit, when I initially started making tortillas, I would just literally put a little drop or 2 of olive oil in there. And as I've been experimenting, as we've been going along, I've kind of stopped doing that and I've just started putting a massive glug of sunflower oil. It makes it so much easier to knead, it makes it easier to roll, and it does actually make them quite tasty. If you're a bit conscious about oil consumption, then you can put a bit less in. You can knead it fine, it just takes a bit longer, it's a bit more of a crummy texture. But we'll not worry about that now. Put a massive glug in. And to appease the taste buds, just a bit of salt. And this is literally the foundation of our tortillas. This is where it starts. Just water, oil, flour, and a bit of salt. Now onto the fun bit. Now we're just going to mix it in the bowl. And we're literally just going to mix it until it starts to combine. So in we go. So once you've kind of got a bit of a crummy consistency, you can see some bits are coming together. Just literally get your hands in there, start squishing it together. You'll start noticing it forms a lot easier. It's actually a really nice and quite entertaining dough to play with. It's like Play-Doh for adults, except you can actually eat this without getting poisoned. We're literally just going to pour this out onto the surface and we're going to start kneading it so we get rid of all these crummy parts. So I'm going to scoop all this out. If yours is super crummy, to the point that you're kind of struggling to work with it, don't worry, maybe just add a bit of water to it or a bit more oil, get a bit more moisture in there, and then just get hands on with it. And then on the opposite side, if it's too wet, add a bit of flour in it, keep playing around with it. Okay, so about 5 to 10 minutes of kneading. Can feel like you're doing it forever. The longer you do it, the softer you're going to get it. As you can see now, it's kind of like sort of puttier, like a Play-Doh in my hand. The smoother it is now and the easier it is to kind of squish and mold, the easier it's going to be to roll out, especially if you don't have a tortilla press. So once you're kind of happy with your consistency you've got, it's not the most glamorous of doughs. It is slightly greasy because of the oil in it, but that will benefit you later on. Once you're happy with the consistency, simply throw it back in the bowl, cover it with either a plastic bag, tea towel, whatever you've got lying about, and just leave it for about 10 minutes. It just gives it a bit of rest and it also softens it up. So whilst I'm sort of fiddling with my dough, put it back in the bowl, put it inside for a little bit, and we'll start getting to work on the rest of our fajitas. Okay, so now that the tortilla dough is resting, we are going to pull out the big guns. We are going to fire up Randy for the first time in about 2 months. So it'd be nice to see him again, reconnect with Randy, the Traeger Ranger. Right, so we're going to fire up the Randy, get out the big guns. So I'm probably going to cook it on around 120 to start with. We can always turn it up as we go along, but 120 is a good starting point. And ignite, and away he goes. So now the dough's nice and rested, we're just gonna get it out and we're gonna throw it straight onto our surface. Ta-da! You can knead it slightly, soften it up a bit more. You can either do that with your hands or do it on the surface. Either way, this is to make it easier for you going forward when we roll it out. I have a dough cutter for this next bit. I'm just going to cut it into 4. If you don't have one, a knife will do. You can just tear it apart with your hands. It's up to you. So I've got it into 4. If these are a bit too thick, I can just make slightly larger ones, or alternatively, I can just make another batch, because as you can see, it really didn't take that long. Right, so I've got my first dough ball victim. All you need is a rolling pin, and we're just going to start working the dough. If you have a tortilla press, this is loads easier. If you don't, it's only going to take a couple of minutes, and it's so worth it. And as well, you can choose the thickness. I quite like a thick tortilla. So now we're going into Randy. I'm just going to start by doing the first one. I'm just going to put it in there and keep checking it. You can do these in a frying pan. Take about 2 minutes on each side, but we're going to experiment. We're going to cook it straight onto the skillet that's now heating up in Randy. So I'm pretty confident the first one is done. So I'm just going to pull it out. I mean, it's definitely solid, gone a bit solid, so I'm just going to taste a bit. If it wasn't so hot, I would taste a bit. Okay, I'm just going to... Potentially that's a tiny bit overdone. So, but it's done. So we kind of know around 150 to 160 for about 5 minutes. Now time to put the next one in and not cook it for too long this time. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to say that's done. I'm just going to quickly give it the shape that I kind of want later. As you can see, I've done with the first one. Just so if it dries out a little bit, it's not going to crack down the sides, and I can add my fillings without it being a bit too dry.